is legitimate for states to deny residence to immigrants who openly contradict states' predominant values.
God, that's wordy.
Here, you don't. That.
Strikes one and then the affirmative essentially chooses as it is. Is it legitimate for states to deny residence to immigrants who openly promote that state's predominant values?
Okay, so we're right.
Do I have like questions for the judges before we begin?
Yeah. What are your judging preferences?
I was a circuit policy debater. I coach and judge circuit policy, LT predominantly. Quite like embedded line-by-line analysis, impacts calculation, pretty by the flow stuff.
I do college partly, and I'm pretty sure I've told you before, do college partly, am a nihilist, so I don't really care about fluffy values unless you tell me why they matter. I'm open to the idea that democracy is good, but I don't assume it. The same goes for free trade and pretty much anything else. Hell, if you give a good warrant for why death is good, go for it. But other than that, yeah, I'm open pretty much anywhere. Oh, default competing interpretations on me. That's it.
I'm a mix of them, but like less experienced each category. So I did debate on the circuit, but not often on book policy in LD high school. Currently Stanford.
So, two questions, I guess. Are off-time roadmaps okay? And how do you guys weigh alternatives?
Are we in supposed to be alternatives?
Like in a critique.
I like against the plan or like against. Is that what you mean?
You may have to explain.
Like, how do you weigh an alternative action in a critique?
I think you weigh it in the same way as a policy. It's like, right, it's different. Yeah.
I'm not committed to that at all.
No.
How do we convince me of it?
All right. So,
I don't have, yeah, I don't know, so go for it.
brief off-time roadmap. I'll go over framework, thesis, and then plan and then solvency. Okay, start the time now. We stand in strong affirmation of the resolution that it is legitimate for states to deny residence to immigrants who openly contradict the state's predominant values. So going into the affirmative case, the 1AC, the status quo exists because we allow it. Framework, point 1. The resolution serves as a guideline for debate rather than a hard and fast rule. We, as the app, can choose to reject the resolution. Framework, point 2. Fiat is a fiction that allows debaters to create structured worlds, to try to objectively weigh something by only looking at the end results. It really ignores entirely the means by which the advocacy is reached to its goals. Framework, point 3. Because it's the creation of these ideas and the methods used to enact these ideas that come before the impacts of the round today, basically pre-Fiat. All of the impact analysis here will stem from the methodological implications of the round. Framework, point 4. The only tangible impacts of this round are the results of our conduct within the round and our individual rhetoric. So we need to analyze the value of the resolution itself before we can look to the post-Fiat impacts. Framework, point 5. The role of the ballot in today's debate is to vote for the team that best improves parliamentary debate. Any questions?
Can you repeat number 3 and 2?
Okay, framework point 3 is because the creation of ideas and methods used to enact those ideas come before the impacts of today's ideals. All of the impact analysis must stem from the methodological implications of the round. Yes?
One last question. What exactly does it mean to vote for the team who best improves parliamentary debate?
They should vote for whichever team can prove more benefits to parliamentary debate and the community as a whole. Okay, sorry, I have to do that to the rest of it. Okay, so the thesis. First point of the thesis, right now parliamentary debate is a joke. Parliamentary debate is viewed by the larger forensics community as a childish event due to its frequent lack of education, resolutions, and the NFL barely acknowledges Parley that it exists, and it doesn't have an event at nationals. In fact, very few of national circuit events actually, or national circuit tournaments, hold Parley as an event. Going on to thesis point 2, topics are to blame. Whereas in policy, public forum, and in Congress, all of the resolutions there are public or foreign policy. This is important because they're focused, or they can also be focused on ethical dilemmas, but they're focused on improving the debaters, having the debaters be educational, whereas Parley debate resolutions invite otherizing, invite racism and sexist rhetoric. Going into subpoint A here, in quarterfinals of MLK 2015, the resolution on balance, Palestine is more guilty of war crimes than Israel, invited argumentation that is based on Islamophobic or anti-Semitic rhetoric. This is bad. Going on to subpoint B, in the semifinals of Browns at GGSA State Quals 2015, the resolution in the United States, racism is worse than sexism, forced both sides into morally reprehensible positions, denying racism and sexism, or rejecting that they are connected. Yes?
Can you give us an actual value that you're trying to uphold in today's debate? You're kind of giving all these various problems that you see with Parley, but you're not actually delivering any type of thing that you're trying to defend or change Parley towards.
How the judges should weigh this is that the role of the ballot is to create a better parliamentary community as a whole. Vote for the team that best improves parliamentary debate. Thesis subpoint 3. At Stanford 2015, the topic Ray Rice does not deserve a second chance at the NFL is obviously terrible because it forces neg teams to defend a perpetuator of domestic violence. This is bad. Subpoint B of the thesis. Parliamentary debate is only educational when we have a resolution that asks us to examine key issues, that asks us to broaden our worldview, and exposes us to a more diverse set of constructive viewpoints. In many instances, the topic before us actually ignore these issues, are non-topics, and the resolutions are so broad that it is impossible to have any adequate, for neg to adequately have ground. Sorry, I'll get to it at the end of the thesis. So, subpoint 1 here, MLK 2015. Public schools should allow the consumption of treats such as cupcakes during school hours. It's emblematic of the unimportant topics that curtail education in Parliament. Subpoint 2, Stanford. The topics that talk about greed versus sloth, gluttony versus wrath. They're so broad and near impossible to prep that independently we cannot come up with cases that actually have clash and have any arguments that our educational community or any chance to even clash on these arguments, which reduces clash and education. Thesis subpoint 3. The resolution wishes to not meet the criteria perpetuates beliefs that high school parliamentary debaters cannot debate real resolutions, that we are stupid, that we are mentally unfit to debate an actual resolution, a policy resolution, and debate on grounds that will allow for a fair and equal debate. Subpoint 4, resolutions are one-sided. This leads to randomness in the debate. If they're one-sided, we might as well just flip a coin and avoid parliamentary debate as a whole, because there's no point in participating in something where we know one side will go into the topic and win. So, going into the issue of the plan. So, sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, can you respond to the fact that a lot of these cases that you're accusing the topic bearers of being, or basically delivering flawed cases, can you respond to the fact that cases, for instance, let's say the Ray Rice case, are really trying to evaluate deeper problems in our society and how we view moral and ethical issues?
And yet the next ground there is still advocating for domestic violence or advocating for ignoring domestic violence. Sorry, not this time I want to get to. So the first part of the plan is that resolution demoralizes and incentivizes a loss of education. This means that this decreases the validity of debate. Therefore, a coin flip can automatically determine the results of the round. And on behalf of the schools that we have, since we are debating on behalf of these schools, since we go out and debate these topics for the schools, Parley's not going to expand unless we can prove that debate's educational, that there's a reason to debate. Going into subpoint 6. These effects do not come from current impacts. We should value education first because education is more important than any other impact in the round. Subpoint 6, the debate is a game. The winner is the better person, but that is not how it is currently in debate. Sounding better should not be the reason for winning. Now, going into the plan. The first part of the plan is to advocate the POI Advisory Board to write the topics. They are a respected group of coaches and other people who work to write proper resolutions. Subpoint B, endorse the AF as an advocacy of the ballot. Going into solvency. The first point of solvency is that the panel will have topics that have equal ground and are educational. This is important because it improves parliamentary debate as a whole. second subpoint here is that NSDA will recognize parley as an event because it will be viewed as a critical thinking and fast thinking event. You'll have to think, you'll be a better team to win. Subpoint 3 is that the advocacy of the winner is always remembered. Vote AF to guarantee their solvency. If you vote nay, no one will remember us. So you have to vote AF to show resistance and vote for the team that wins the role of battle.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to briefly go into what I will thoroughly label a formal topicality, and then I will move on from there to producing the negation zone case, and then finally going on to the affirmations case. So, okay, so starting right off. Hello everyone, thanks so much for coming today and making today's debate possible. Right into the topicality. Now, right now we'd like to declare a standard for debate. Debate should be fair and functional, and both sides should have equal ground and so forth. Because the crucial thing is fairness, because that's our point out. If there is no fairness in the debate, then naturally there's no real competition and the debate is a mess. And so debate should not even exist. Now, our opponents are violating this standard because they have chosen to ignore the resolution. And they did that last time, but now they're doing it in a rather more creative way, one which even denies us the ability to prepare. We've had no time to prepare. Our case that we prepped is completely useless. We are now arguing completely impromptu, whereas our opponents have had 20 minutes to prepare this case. That means they have an automatic advantage, which is of course unfair. And so this brings me to our alternative, which is that we debate the resolution as it originally was, which was relatively well vetted and gave equal ground to both sides, and was agreed upon as the finals resolution for an informed tournament according to the framers' intent. And the reason we should do that is because it does value fairness better. And it does make it possible that we have an equal debate, and that is, after all, the most important thing in any debate. Not to mention that it is more educational, because the truth is, we all know a great deal about parley. We all are parley debaters. We are learning nothing from a round that is about parley debate, given we talk about this in our spare time anyway, whereas topics like this are actually pretty important, as we'll be getting into later on, in terms of learning about other countries' response to immigration. This is something that affects all of our lives as real human beings, as citizens in the future. And so, that's already an a priori issue why I want you to vote for the negation today. But let's go into our case. Now, I'm going to basically try to contest our points in the affirmation made, and the really key issue here is the question, quote-unquote, good for the parley community, and what exactly that means. Our points haven't really been clear about what is the goal, what is a good thing for the parley community. So I'm going to show you why, in fact, their case is extremely horrible for the parley community. So our first contention is that they reduce the legitimacy of parley because they demonstrate that the rules are pointless in parley. They openly flout, obviously, the rules of the resolution is impromptu and given, and they openly flout the fact that the both sides are supposed to have a reasonably equal prep time, and the affirmation cannot just make up whatever it wants. And even if this helps the progression, the goal of having better resolutions, which I'll get into later, they are doing it in a way that is innately corrupt and self-referential because they're engaging in the very type of problem that reduces the legitimacy of parliamentary debate. When we look at why people don't like parliamentary debate, they often attack it for its lack of structure, its lack of rules, which often creates unfair burdens. They attack it for people being able to do whatever they want. That's what the affirmation has been talking about. And this is a very, very clear aspect of this exact problem happening. And here's the crucial impact here. This is the finals round of the Stanford Invitational in 2015. It's being recorded, guys. Hi, audience. And what happens is this is an extremely big impact, because everyone is now going to see that parley is a joke, and the affirmation can make up whatever topic that they want, which impacts directly to everyone's respect of parley. This is going to go out on the internet immediately, and impacts directly to people's belief that this is, therefore, doesn't have any of the impacts it claims to have, like creativity and fairness in a reasonable debate format for all. I'll take the
Actually, policy has case, policy has performance case, which is even more drastic than this. Is policy seen as a joke?
First of all, that's contestable. There are many people who do see policy as a joke, not in the legal sense, but in many other senses, and that decreases respect for policy debate among other people. But additionally to that, it's also the case that this is especially abusive, at least with K's and policy and things like that. Everything has been prepped out in advance. We all know what the resolution is, and therefore both sides have a little bit more of an equal ground, and we're just contesting whether or not a policy K is a good idea. Let's move on to my second contention, which is that philosophy is one of the most beneficial things for us to talk about, and just getting rid of that is absurd. And when we talk about this, the truth is, this is what Parley offers uniquely among debate events like policy. This is why LD is also a good thing, is because philosophy is inherently incredibly impactful. In fact, arguably it's most impactful. After all, we can learn very easily about the world events, or comparatively easily at least, but this unique service of talking about philosophy, about the things that aren't necessarily in the New York Times and The Economist, the things that take a little bit more effort, means this is something that Parley only can offer. And the benefits of students knowing about philosophy means that they have a structure to form all other arguments in, that they have a much better moral grounding, whatever decision they come to, as opposed to just knowing about current events. It makes it more likely that they'll make good and moral decisions throughout their entire lives. And honestly, that's a more important benefit even than the goal of Parley. The goal of Parley should be to enrich its members, not to have a national tournament. That's its #1 priority. Now, our third contention, it actually decreases the logicalness and facts present in Parley, because they remove even more prep time than otherwise by having this precedent, which they're setting right now on television, of changing the topic for no reason. For example, when we look at, this removes the negation's ability to use prepped cases on the internet, which in turn means, naturally, that there are less facts involved, that Parley becomes more spacious and so forth. And this is crucial because often the biggest critique of parliamentary debate is that it is spacious, is that there are no facts. And so on their value, we turn their value of how we want to have Parley be credible, I'm sorry, not at this time, by showing, in fact, they're doing that worse by removing the facts, especially from the negation side. It also naturally actually harms both sides' ability to think of different things besides the ones that they're comfortable with, which leads me straight to my fourth contention. It allows the affirmation to just do what's comfortable to them. It allows them to pick whatever topic they want. For example, our opponents are more comfortable debating the broader concepts of Parley than they are talking about real issues that affect the real world, which means that the affirmation gets to talk about things which are not educational or useful to them. I'm sorry, I do have a lot to get through, and therefore it's really hurts the educational value of parliamentary debate and its enriching value, and it means that debates are naturally skewed because the affirmation always gets advantage from the precedents that they are currently setting. And so all of this means that their plan is not only going to decrease the legitimacy of Parley, the value that they brought up, but it's really concrete impacts to the average person in the Parley debater, which really should be our goal. Now let's move on to their case. I'm going to actually move around because they had so much stuff. Going line by line is kind of pointless. The key points here, let's talk about solvency. Solvency is huge. They have offered no reason why the POI Institute would offer better resolutions than one of the most respected national debate coaches in the country, one of the biggest debate events in the entire country, nor why this therefore is any better whatsoever. And we've shown why also this advocacy is really going to change resolutions. If anything, it's going to heap shame on people who want to advocate for better resolutions by making them look like silly people who are unwilling to even change the debate. So that means we actually turn their solvency. This is going to hurt their case by heaping ridicule on people who have problems with resolutions and complaining about them, and actually sending that back. And that impacts to their entire case. Every single other thing that they said is immediately turned just off the point that they have no solvency whatsoever. And therefore, that the act of negation should win today's debate. So when we look at what the values are, first of all, this is absurd, and I'm making this stuff up on the spot as I speak, which is kind of fun but really not fair at all. So in terms of topicality, you should vote for me. But secondly, because even on their definition, which is absurd, they are making things worse in a very real and concrete sense. And those are the reasons why I want you to vote for the negation today. Thank you.
So I will go over let's go framework, thesis, plan, and then, no, sorry, let me go, framework, thesis, plan, topicality, egg case.
So the same word with half on top.
Basically, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Let's start with extensions. The first extension is AF can reject the resolution. The second extension is that fiat is a fiction. They haven't responded to this. Fiat is a fiction. We need to weigh pre-fiat impacts. That's the third extension. Fourth extension, only tangible impacts are the results of our conduct in the round, which actually throws away all of their defense, but I'll get to that in a second. Fifth extension is that the role of the ballot is to approve parliamentary debate. They haven't offered any alternative role of the ballot. They've conceded this, which means that we need to look at role of the ballot and which side better benefits parliamentary debate. They've conceded our entire thesis that parliamentary debate is currently viewed as a joke, shown by the fact that it is a lower point value, that it's not present in most national circuit tournaments. They've conceded that the topics are the reason this happens, because the topics are not policy related, the topics don't ask us meaningful questions, and because the topics sometimes ask us to be racist, offensive, otherizing positions. That's all for now. No, actually, Extend the examples of the Ray Rice topic, the Palestine topic, extend the MLK cupcakes topic, the Stanford topic centered around vices in the Bible, extend all of our examples to topics that are wrong with Parley right now.
All of this reasoning and evidence about the problem with topics depends on your plan solving for topics. And as we have demonstrated, do you have any response at all to the fact that you're actually putting back the idea of parliamentary being a serious event?
I'm getting to solvency, that's the next point. Okay, extend the fact that we're perpetuating the belief that parliamentary debate is not a serious event, that parliamentary debaters are not serious debaters, and now we finally get to the plan. The plan, as we said, the POI Advisory Board will write topics, and that you should vote for the act as an endorsement of this advocacy. They've said that we don't have solvency. We haven't explained why anyone could write resolutions better than the people who are currently writing resolutions for MLK and Stanford. The solvency is empirically demonstrated by the topics we've seen in the final rounds and the prelim rounds so far in this tournament, whereas the rounds debated, written by members of this board, were in fact policy rounds and asked serious questions about policy. We got to debate topics such as the examples we cited, and MLK and Stanford cupcake topics, similar topics like this. So the solvency is empirically demonstrated by comparison of the resolutions that were debated, that were written by this advisory board, which is our advocacy, compared to the resolutions. Yeah.
Can policy topics not also be unfair, hackneyed, or otherwise broken?
Of course they can. It's just they're not in this case. If you look at the ones that were written by the POI advisory board, they weren't unfair, they weren't hackneyed, which means that our advocacy doesn't bite to any points about unfair or hackneyed policy topics. And also, I just note that their argument, not at this time, I'll just note that the argument about our solvency and that we don't solve is defense. They don't show you a reason why we actively reverse the solvency, which means that basically even one small amount of solvency would win the round because this is pre-fiat solvency. Let's move on to the topicality. Their topicality is that debate should be fair and that ignoring the resolution is unfair. First of all, the critique outweighs the critique. The advocacy of the critique extends beyond the round, whereas T in its impact is limited to this round. And second of all, just on the issue of critique, I would have a few answers here. First of all, creativity should be the biggest impact of framework. Creativity outweighs education. We shouldn't be asking what is the best debate, but what can debate do? We allow debate to be a machine of destabilization to change things. That's a better framework than the framework they're proposing. Also, the normativity of their framework of saying what should we do is bad, because the way we're currently debating blinds us to basic facts about reality, which means that asking what we should do within that blinded framework is meaningless. Also, the framework is micro-fascism because it prioritizes debate as being we should do one debate that we've had a million times as opposed to having a new or creative debate. And finally, the idea of fairness that they refer to is self-serving because if the kind of debate that we're talking about is bad, then the idea of fairness within a bad debate construct is meaningless because the construct itself is bad. Let's look at the negative contentions. The negative contentions, first of all, that we're reducing legitimacy of Parley because we're ignoring the resolution. First of all, violating the rules of an event that lacks legitimacy does not reduce the legitimacy of that event because the rules themselves lack legitimacy. Also, they've conceded all of our framework, which means that this whole point about rules doesn't matter within the context of this round. Also, they've conceded the uniqueness point that policy has Ks, and in fact, much crazier Ks, performance Ks, doing poetry, dancing around, singing, whatever else, and that these Ks have not yet destroyed the legitimacy of policy. In most people's eyes, policy has a higher point value. Policy is present in literally every important tournament, which means that, yeah, sure.
In the past, when policy had many, many less of these cases, that's when it became a national event, and we argue it's in fact much more difficult to remove something from that, even once it's become ridiculous. But if Parley starts off ridiculous, it will never, ever get there.
Okay, no solvency to show that currently policy is in the process of being removed from national circuit tournaments or anything else. Policy is and is still considered the most legitimate kind of debate. And in fact, you can see that the level of critical argumentation that's going on in policy, both the high school and college level, is going up. Last year, the college finals of the NDT were policy versus a critical team versus another critical team. So you can see that if, as they say, critiques are illegitimate and critiques make an event seem non-serious, then that doesn't explain why they're growing in legitimacy while policy continues to be the most important, the most accepted event. Yes.
How do you respond then to the fact that all of these other debate events came after policy? If policy really does have this monopoly on legitimacy, then why are all these other events growing and becoming increasingly popular, showing that they actually are better, basically established by MLK this year and Stanford this year being bigger than last year? We already see that clearly.
I said nothing about policy having a monopoly on legitimacy. All I'm saying is that policy shows that you have no uniqueness on the claim that critiques take away legitimacy, because policy is filled with them. Policy is filled with crazier ones, and they haven't taken away the legitimacy yet, which means we still have enough solvency that overall we benefit the parliamentary debate community. Also, they say that let's see, their second contention is that philosophy is good and that Parley has us debate philosophy. Parley doesn't have us debate philosophy, Parley has us bastardized philosophy. The topics at tournaments like MOK and Stanford don't ask serious philosophical questions, but instead encourage us to answer questions that are either so broad as to be meaningless, or questions that philosophers considered several long time ago. They don't ask us to seriously consider philosophy, all they ask us to do is pretend we're considering philosophy. Plus, this is non-unique because, as they said, LD exists, so there's no unique benefit to making Parley be a philosophical event. Their third contention was that we decrease the logical basis of Parley because there's no prep. And we're saying that prep on a bad resolution is still bad, and that having prep time is not going to fix the problems of Parley. Plus, the lack of prep time only applies to the one round where we're running this K, whereas the solvency extends far beyond this. Plus, the creativity of our K and what we're running outweighs any issue of whether there's facts or not. Plus, we have more facts in this case than they do, which means any argument about not having facts falls to our side. Contention 4 is that we're allowing the AF to do what's comfortable. Let me just say that we've never run a K before. We dropped to a K in the quarterfinals at MPDI. We don't like Ks. We're not very good at Ks, but we felt like we needed to run it, and so we ran it. So the idea that we're just going for what's comfortable is empirically denied by our past record and what we've done in past tournaments. For all these reasons, we strongly urge a affirmative vote.
What game did you drop to an NPI? Was it Altair or Bat?
It was Batman.
They beat the Dark Knight. One people know.
Waiting for that.
Just thanking everyone, judges and partner, making this debate possible, write a roadmap off time. I'm going to be getting into the topicality issue, how they really didn't address anything, how they actually contradicted themselves, their own speaker, and then go into our case and then into their plan. Or actually, no, topicality, plan, our case. Okay. All right, on the issue of topicality, they basically said that the critique outweighs under the value that creativity is the biggest value, not education. But let me quote their first speaker who said, "We value education." Already, right off the bat, we said that the two speakers are actually contradicting themselves. When I asked the first speaker what they were valuing in today's debate, what kind of advocacy they were taking, they said education. They said education, that was the only thing they said. They did not actually say creativity, and creativity is not inherent to a critique itself. We do not know that they came up with this critique. Someone else could have come up with this critique, and they could have just applied it to every single round that they did at today's debate. The fact is not only are they changing their own value now that we refuted their first one, by showing that fairness is actually key in order to have any education, we already see that their new value of creativity doesn't even exist in their case because we don't know that they actually were creative in this regard, and already we see that creativity is not the key point in debate because creativity is really just a derivative of education. Education is the overall value because we're not just trying to boost our own egos and show how great we are. We're trying to have a debate in which everyone who's watching, everyone who's involved is learning. And we don't just learn by looking at, oh, look at our creativity in this situation. And then they go on in their response, not this time, they go on in their response that by saying should is bad. This is already a clear contradiction since they already are taking an action to try and establish their line of reasoning and establish their kind of solving of the perceived issues with the status quo. I'm going to be going on later how that they actually still do not do that. But we still see that their response to our topicality is contradicting their own case for the second time. And then they got into this interesting point on we don't want to just have the same debate a million times, but then they go on to basically say we should love policy debate. I found this very ironic, seeing that policy debate really does have one topic for the same year, so they're really not even understanding what they're arguing for, and in reality, they're contradicting themselves throughout the response to our topicality. So let me get into more offense on our topicality. Basically, by denying fairness, a point that they really didn't address at all, how they're actually denying fairness by denying us any kind of prep time. What we're actually seeing is, in addition to providing an insolvent and a logical plan, they actually are denying both education on their own debate and denying creativity. The creativity that they provide does not actually have any tangible benefits for this round. While we actually see that while us trying to provide fairness and trying to provide education, we actually do have tangible benefits, because if you cannot learn, if you don't have some equality in a system, the system itself is inherently flawed and will inherently fail. We see that the affirmation team really doesn't even try and uphold their own value or provide evidence that they're upholding their own value. But on our case, we actually have a wider range of topics, more diverse topics, far more interesting topics. They just want to debate current events according to really the first year, current events and policy motions. So because we actually have a wider range of topics, we require more creativity. So even if you don't buy anything I just said, on that point alone, that we require basically a more greater diversity of reasoning and understanding of various topics and the functionality of reasoning in a debate round, we actually seize their own value because we provide more creativity, and we don't require that creativity to simply be a criticism of what's going on in the round itself. Now getting into their plan, basically POI Advisory Board makes the topics. They have this clear logical fallacy that somehow the part, these selected resolutions, represents the whole. And this is an enormous issue because they say, all right, look, I'm going to take these 3 resolutions out of the dozens that happen each year and look at these 3 resolutions that we didn't like. And suddenly, we see that clearly, apparently, one side is better. This is completely unrepresentative of the nature of party debate itself. We've had plenty of good topics at this tournament itself. We're sorry that they don't feel like they can debate on those topics in an effective way. But let's actually, when we actually look at what they're saying, empirically demonstrated by topics shown, when you only show a few of the topics, that's not empirics, that's not actually any legitimate standard. So really, what we're seeing is that they're not showing anything legitimate. Let me give an example. A policy debate that I once heard is that they were going to basically name a sewage tower. A sewage tower. Now, basically, we can say, all right, well, if naming a sewage tower is not worthwhile, then clearly policy as a whole is not worthwhile. That is according, not this time. That is according to the affirmation standard of what counts as empirics, what counts as true logic. So in reality, we clearly see already that the affirmation team in today's debate is failing in defending their own plan, and all our reputations about their plan being installed, them not solving the problems that they represent in the status quo, basically shows that we should already win the debate on this point alone, not to mention the fact that they already destroyed the fairness and education of this debate and a topicality that they poorly contested. Now, onto our case. Basically, our first contention, that they're openly in violation of their own advocacy. I've already brought this up, and they basically said, talking about K's, and we tried to really discuss how really how their entire framework, their entire line of advocacy on this entire point is just flawed. Basically, the fact that Parley is a newer organization than Policy, and they mistake Parley being newer for Parley being less legitimate altogether, or Parley's lack of legitimacy being a result of the topics itself. This is a clear flaw in their case, and when I brought up how Parley has been growing in recent years, and meanwhile Policy is actually losing ground thus to all these other types of debate that cropped up after Policy, when I asked them at POI, they had no tangible or legitimate response. So already we see that their responses to our first contention do fall altogether. And we already talked about how the AF doesn't solve their own goal, and because I already showed that on our point, you can flow our first contention across. Going on to our second contention, philosophy is beneficial. They said, oh, well, these are joke topics. You don't consider seriously. No, we consider them incredibly seriously. We are the ones who are actually debating on these topics. They're the ones who are saying, no, unless you're Plato and Socrates, then there's no reason to discuss the topics. Well, we can't all be the experts in a field, but we can try and build a baseline from where everyone can learn and everyone can have these educational benefits. So already we are seeing that the affirmation team is really just making this absurd standard that suddenly, unless we're discussing those complex of topics, that philosophy has no benefit. This is clearly flawed because then no one could actually start learning philosophy because it's just a joke until it gets to that point of expertise. So already flow that point across. Third contention decreases logic and facts. They said that, well, the prep time doesn't basically fix that. And we have to value the creativity yet again. The fact is that they contested the whole facts point, but the logic point still flows across as far as prep time. And our fourth contention allows AF to do what's comfortable for them. They said, well, it's not us. We're not comfortable with PACE, but it's not just about them. It's about all of Parley. It's about how this impacts across a wider range. And because they really fail in this regard, they don't respond effectively to any of our points. I urge a vote in negation today. Thank you.
Okay. So, in this final speech for the negation, what I'm going to do is I'm going going to go straight into lots of voter issues to show you why the negation really wins. That's my roadmap. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. Enjoying this round, mostly. Starting time now. Hello everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. One more time, make today's day possible. Jumping right in, my first voter issue, I think is actually really interesting. I'm going to start off with what my opponent said. We should be judged for our conduct in this round. That's a goal, right? Okay, let's judge based on our conduct. Our opponents have chosen that they want to make a statement. And in order to make that statement, they are willing to completely hurt us, make us lose a debate for no reason with no prep time, ignore our topicality, and otherwise sacrifice us as a team who have worked hard to compete in this tournament so that they can make their statement. That is immoral, that is unfair, and that is not a functional way to do things. That does a dangerous end justifies the means philosophy. That's not good conduct. We want to talk about conduct in the round. Our opponents try to justify their solvency off 3 examples without adding any reasoning or anything else. Judge, when we talk about why people don't like Parley, that's exactly why people don't like Parley. So their conduct in this round, which should be your judging standard, really reinforces the very problems that they say exist, and you should vote that very, very, very highly. Just them doing this right now in front of that camera is hurting Parley more than the concept of this debate is. Similarly, they ignore the issues that they are told to debate and go on and do other things and stick to what's comfortable to them. And they are doing this, let's be clear, just like they have done it in the past, because they feel like it's more comfortable to them. Because they want to talk about this instead of something else. And whether or not that's because they like this topic more, or it's because they find this issue is important, or because they feel advocacy, what the truth is they're doing is that they are therefore violating the fact that in Parley we're supposed to be challenged by our topics and so forth. And therefore they are, even if they're doing this for a more reason that's besides just they want to win, they are still necessarily doing the same problem, which is doing something they're more comfortable with, and therefore being unfair. If we want to judge them on their standards in the ground, they violate every single standard that they bring up as important in Parley, whether or not it's legitimacy, education, creativity, because they're running something that's not at all related, they're not being challenged by their topic, fairness, or uniqueness in their topics. So right away, on this point, on their very own value criteria, I think the negation should win today's debate. But from now on, we move on through voter issues. The third points did try to prove that, they start talking about values and why Parley should help Parley more. I'm going to actually talk about those values and how our point here is going to actually help those values more. And let's go exactly down the list here and what they're doing with their policy proposal, what supposedly matters, which they would only bring up if they felt they matters. I'm going to go and weigh that now. Let's talk first about solvency, namely their cases or their lack thereof. When challenged on solvency, asked why the POI board is better at doing this than other coaches, their response was essentially to bring up examples and then say that the POI board does policy topics. Now, besides the fact that the examples have no weight whatsoever because it's correlation versus causation, and that there are hundreds of examples of good topics, which my partner and I didn't bring up because it would be a waste of time, I would agree with you. I think most of the topics we've judged today have been okay. But perhaps more importantly than that, they have no real evidence. Their only point here is, okay, well, the POI board does policy topics better, but they never responded to why policy topics are better, and began to why that is the case as well. And so the truth is that they're not really accomplishing anything, and in fact, that their case hurts the very solvency that they're talking about, because as they advocate here, they make a ridicule and a joke of the final round of Stanford, which therefore makes their case look a little bit more ridiculous. And for the people who feel like we should be serious, and Parley should be serious, they set back the progress of reform, regardless of which way you vote. And so you should vote for the negation because to punish them for saying back the progress of reform just by opening their mouth in the first speech. Now let's move on from there to the second voter issue, which is about philosophical topics and the benefits of that, as well as tying into education. So in their world, basically, they say Parley should only be about policy. In our world, we say it should be broader. And going right into that, just first of all, the great goal here is to teach people. The goal of parliamentary debate is not to find out the truth. It never has been. There are better people to know what to do in Syria, or what to do in Lebanon, or whether or not countries should let immigration, because that's what the government's job is. The reason we do Parley is to enrich the people inside Parley. That has to be Parley's fundamental goal, otherwise it should not exist in activity. And even if the debates are already settled, talking about them in philosophy by naturally teaches people about those issues. And so this is crucial because even if they were unfair, which I'm going to prove that they're not, even if they were pointless, even if everything else was lost, we teach this absolutely crucial skill, which is vastly more useful than current events, because current events will be out of date in a few years, but these moral concepts and general argumentation can last an entire lifetime and help a Parley person. And so for these reasons, this voter issue, like my other two, absolutely outweigh everything else in this debate. And finally, I want to talk about legitimacy. I want to talk about the fact that Parley, although new, is growing spectacularly fast, even far faster than the policy does, which shows that the Parley conduit of not doing the policy does has been pretty effective. In their case, he's actually messing with that. And the truth is, you really should value having more people in Parley as a key goal, because that spreads Parley's educational value and usefulness as opposed to anything else, which really, again, is what Parley should be about to do. And even if, again, things are unfair, the truth is that they are actually making things more unfair by making fun of the rules, ignoring the structure, and so on and so forth. Final point, oh, actually no, not final point on this voter issue. For these reasons today, judges, I urge you, both for the future of Parley and for the future of this round, to vote in the negation. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few responses to their voting issues and then our own voting issues. Okay, start the time. Okay, so their main response to the entirety of the case is you didn't debate on the topic. First of all, they already conceded this one. They conceded the framework point that, first of all, fiat is bad, and second of all, that the affirmative can reject the resolution just on this alone. They should lose the debate. Now, going on to their voting issues. So their first voting issue is that we should be judged on conduct in the round. First of all, the rule of the ballot that we presented in the first speech and that they never negated was that the rule of the ballot is to vote for the team that best improves the parliamentary debate. You have to extend this across the flow because they never respond to it. Because of that, you should vote on that rule of the ballot. They make this argument that they worked hard, as if we didn't work hard to get here. They expect that we got topics that made it easier, but instead we got topics that made it harder, topics that challenged us. As we mentioned, these topics were better, and as we mentioned, we never did this just to screw over another team. Now, when they come up here and say that this critique is just...
point of order, this is an entirely new point about their intentionality and why they were running these pointless Ks. They've never once, at any point in today's debate, brought up, we are doing this not to screw another team. And even so, that's just inherent to what they were doing.
The critique first speech, we say that the purpose of the critique is to improve parliamentary debate.
If I may actually finish what I was saying. Well, then he interrupted. But
According to chapter rules, you're allowed 15 seconds to make your point,
that's,
and I'm allowed 15 seconds to respond.
yeah, I get 15. All right.
Okay, going back on time. So they say that we justify solvency off of 3 examples. No, we provide 3 links for how we solve in today's debate. They argue that this K is just trying to be normative, trying to be more comfortable. This is the first K we've ran. We've dropped to a K. We are running this K because we believe it will help parliamentary debate. That's why we are running it. Going on to this idea that we never explained why the K is good. The K rejects current Parley. The K rejects saying that racism is worse than sexism. The K rejects all of these ideas that are morally reprehensible and that harm education. And they never provide a reason to vote against this. They provide one last little stab in their voting issues that we're ignoring the rules. They have never once cited a rule that we are violating. They cannot even prove that we are violating a rule, and on that, you should just ignore that. So going into voters, the first voter is that of conceding framework. Whether or not you like the K, you have to recognize that they've conceded every single point of framework. They conceded that you weigh the critique first in the round. We say that in our first speech. They concede that fiat is bad, that you have to ignore fiat in this round. They concede that the affirmative has the right to reject the resolution, and that the only tangible results coming from this debate, coming from your ballots, only those have any impact in this round. Nothing else matters in the round. They concede that there is they never provide an alternative role of the ballot, therefore conceding that the role of the ballot is to improve the parliamentary debate community. Vote for the team that does that best. Going into the second voter issue, which is that there's no neg offense on the K. No matter what, all they do is say, oh, the K's bad, oh, they're cheaters. You shouldn't vote for them because they're cheaters. That's all they ever say. They never provide reasons why we are cheaters. They never say, even, that we are cheaters because we have debated other resolutions. And they can't prove that because that is not how things work. You can ask the other teams that debated with us. We do not cheat. But furthermore, this offense that they attempt to provide with us cheating is an offense on the K. They never respond to the fundamental underlying of the K. And for that reason alone, you have to vote on the K, whether or not you agree with it. Now, going into this issue of solvency. They say we have absolutely no solvency. First of all, the POI board is significantly better. Obviously, it's better enough that several teams collectively agreed to go on those topics rather than any other topics. So, just on that alone, the POI board...
I'm sorry. This new justification for why the POI board is better, namely that you yourself agreed to go by the POI board's topics, is somewhat circular but also completely new. If you were going to justify the solvency of your plan by saying that therefore the resolutions are better, you really should have done that earlier in the speech when you
first solvency.
in the MG.
Yeah, first solvency. Sorry.
Okay. Also, I would like it if you guys would be less wordy with your further point of orders. Okay.
Okay. So going back onto this issue, the other issues with the solvency, as we mentioned, the solvency comes directly from you voting for the affirmative. As we say in our third point of solvency, that by voting for the affirmative, you memorialize this. You make people recognize this. Whether or not they disqualify us after that doesn't matter, because your vote counts as a reason that we should change parliamentary debate, that we should reject resolutions that are racist, that we should reject resolutions that are sexist, that we should reject those resolutions. Second of all, they keep talking about this idea of us being on video. First of all, this goes on POI. Most of the people that are on POI would agree with POI advisory boards, but second of all, this provides even more solvency. This supercharges our solvency because we have permanent record of the critique. That makes us solve more in every single world than the negative. So you can't vote for them on solvency. Going into the fourth issue, which is that of critical T. My partner comes up here and talks about their theory shell that they run, and their only response to that is that, oh, they are being fair, but they miss the fundamental point that being fair in a bad debate scenario, being fair in a situation where the entire fundamental framework in which being fair is bad is still bad. If debate is bad, which we argue and they never address, if the current situation of debate is bad, and you want to argue fairness under that, that fairness in and of itself is bad, and you have to reject them on that. And they never address my partner talking about that on the theory. So you can't vote on the theory. So really what we see is that this boils down to the critique. And the critique is the only thing in this round that you can vote on. It's the only thing left standing at the end of the round. And nothing else matters because it's a priori. So for all these reasons, Judge, you have to vote on the critique to legitimize the affirmative team and to stop these harms in parliamentary debate.
Assuming you wants to go out the room for a bit.
You can say.